European Union and the United Kingdom extend Brexit talks. At least 27 people in Nigeria have been killed in a Book Haram attack. And British spy novelist John La Carre dies at age 89. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito, Ecuador. This is from the south. The European Union and the United Kingdom have agreed to extend Brexit talks that were previously scheduled to end on Sunday, as chances of exiting the EU with a trade deal continue to diminish. EU and British leaders said on Sunday they will continue their talks to clinch a post-Brexit trade agreement after the British Prime Minister had earlier on hinted of a possible deadlock in the negotiations. Boris Johnson said the two sides were still very far apart on some key things, as there was too much at stake not to make a final push.
What I'll say is that I think that the UK should continue to try. And I think that's what the people of this country would want me to do. We're going to continue to try. And we're going to try with all our hearts, and we'll be as creative as we possibly can. But what we can't do is compromise on that fundamental nature of what Brexit is all about, which is us being able to control our laws, control our fisheries. It's very, very simple. I think our friends get it. And, you know, we remain willing to talk. We'll continue to do so. But in the meantime, let's get ready for the WTO option. And that's what I told the Cabinet.
In the streets of London, residents have expressed concern over uncertainty on the ongoing Brexit talks. Some UK business operators are worried that the increased tariffs on some of their products, such as cheese, will make businesses unprofitable, while some feel a deal was needed as soon as possible to put an end to the ongoing uncertainty. Johnson and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen talked for less than an hour on Sunday morning following intense talks between the two sides overnight.
The deal itself will not be any benefit to me. I've lost my right to travel. I've lost everything. So there's literally no benefit to a deal. Maybe for the economy slightly better, but overall I don't think there's any benefit at all. It doesn't matter. We're out.
He led us all believe there was a deal to be done, but that's fair. He did so also that, you know, let's get Brexit done. So, and I think that's the thing now. I think people are getting absolutely brassed off with it all, and particularly businesses, I believe, that they just need to know, are we in, you know, oh, sorry, we're out, but have we got a deal or not? And if not, let's get on and plan for it and try and make the best of it that we can.
Heads of state and government from over 70 countries have held a virtual gathering to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, the international pact aimed at curbing global warming. The administration of outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump, who pulled Washington out of the Paris Accord, wasn't represented at the online gathering, but President-elect Joe Biden made clear the U.S. will join again. Also absent were major economies such as Australia, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. Most have offered no significant improvements on their existing emissions targets lately. The Paris Agreement aims to cap a global warming at well under 2 degrees Celsius, ideally no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has urged world leaders to declare a state of climate emergency and shape a greener growth after the coronavirus pandemic.
5 years after Paris, we are still not going in the right direction. Paris promised to limit temperature rise to as close to 1.5 degrees as possible. But the commitments made in Paris were far from enough to get there, and even those commitments are not being met. And so, the central objective of the United Nations for 2021 is to build a truly global coalition for carbon neutrality by the middle of the century. But that promise is not enough. To make it a reality, we need meaningful cuts now to reduce global emissions by 45% by 2030 compared with 2010 levels. And this must be fully reflected in the revised and strengthened nationally determined contributions that the Paris signatories are obliged to submit well before COP26 next year in Glasgow.
EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen has called climate change a human issue at the Climate Ambition Summit.
Europe only accounts for less than 10% of global emissions. Climate change is more than a European issue. It is a human issue. And today there is a global movement for climate action, a movement that counts on powerful nations, but also on countless cities, NGOs, people of goodwill. Europe wants to contribute to the movement and make it grow. We want to work with all those who agree that we must put a price on carbon.
Chinese President Xi Jinping told the virtual climate summit that his country would work to reduce its emissions by 65% by 2030 compared with 2005 levels. He said that renewables would account for 25% of China's primary energy consumption by 2030, and it would aim to have 1,200 gigawatts of solar and wind capacity installed by then.
I announced that China would increase its nationally determined contributions, adopt stronger policies and measures, and strive to reach peak carbon dioxide emissions by 2030, and strive to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. Here I will further announce that by 2030, China's carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP will drop by more than 65% from the 2005 level, and non-fossil fuels will account for about 25% of primary energy consumption. The forest stock volume will be increased by 6 billion cubic meters from the 2005 level. The total installed capacity of wind power and solar power will hit over 1.2 billion kilowatts.
Meanwhile, Chile's President Sebastián Piñera has called on all countries to set net zero goals.
Today, I want to call on the heads of state and government in attendance. We must all move steadily towards development models that are low in emissions and commit to zero net emissions as soon as possible. If we want to keep global temperatures rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius, current carbon emissions must be reduced by at least 45%, almost by half, in the next 10 years, and we must achieve carbon neutrality by 2050.
Let's take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. For the first time in decades, Mexico has canceled the Catholic pilgrimage of Virgin of Guadalupe due to the pandemic. The annual religious event in which millions visit Mexico City's Basilica of Guadalupe on December 11th and the 12th is regarded as one of the world's largest Catholic pilgrimages. Some devotees tried to reach the church despite religious authorities announcing the closure of the basilica. Business owners said they have been affected by the measures, as the millions of pilgrims usually mean a boost to their income.
It's empty. Last year, there were rivers of people. People here with their camping tents. People eating at the hotel. People from all over the world, as well as nationals, and now we don't have anything.
I say that we are living happy because we came and had another year sitting here with the Virgin. But we are a little sad because they will not allow us to come inside to her home and visit her. But the good thing is that we came.
Algeria's President Abdelmadjid Tebboune has announced he's recovering from the COVID-19 illness. The president broke the news in his first televised appearance since he was hospitalized in Germany 2 months ago.
Today, thanks to God and to the doctors of the military hospital, as well as the German doctors, I have started on the road to recovery. It may take 2 or 3 weeks, but God willing, I will recover all my bodily strength.
At least 27 people have been killed in a Boko Haram attack in a Nigerian village of Tamor in Difa region. Reports coming from Nigeria said about 70 jihadist militants from the Boko Haram group invaded Tamor village on Saturday night and started firing and burning villagers' houses. Several other people are reported to have been wounded and others are still missing. The attack came hours before municipal and regional elections went ahead across the country.
Our place has been abandoned by the local government. So far, it is not a peaceful place. Boko Haram has unnerved us. We ask the government to take us back to our father's land. We are tired of being displaced to Difa, in the Republic of Niger. We have problems. We are in trouble. We are worried about hunger. There is no agriculture for our people, no trade. We cannot do anything.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has met with his Sudanese counterpart Abdallah Hamdok to discuss the ongoing conflict in the Tigray region. According to Hamdok, the meeting between the two leaders covered various topics, including political security and humanitarian matters. Sudan, which borders the Tigray region, is currently hosting more than 50,000 Ethiopians who have fled the fighting, which has already left hundreds of people dead. It is the first visit by a foreign leader since fighting between federal forces and the region's dissident ruling party. Morocco has joined other Arab states in normalizing relations with Israel under a deal pushed by the outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump. In turn, the U.S. has backed Morocco's decades-old goal by backing its contested sovereignty in the Western Sahara. The U.S. ambassador to the Kingdom of Morocco, David Fisher, has presented a new map. It says is now the official map of Morocco that includes the disputed territory of Western Sahara. The move has exposed the U.S. interference and imposition of other countries' sovereignty over others, as in the case of Israel and Palestine.
Yesterday, I talked about the historic proclamation that President Trump issued regarding the territory of Western Sahara. And when the United States gave recognition of the sovereignty of Western Sahara, I told you that I would have additional announcements later. I didn't think it would be this soon, but it's this soon. And I would like to show you the map and tell you that today I have the privilege of signing this map, and this map will be presented to His Majesty King Mohammed VI.
And following the Israel-Morocco relations normalization, Palestinians have condemned the deal and have called on the Moroccan parliament to criminalize the move. Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip said the new normalization deal between Israel and Morocco will weaken the Palestinian cause. With barely a month left in his presidency, outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump, who is a staunch backer of Israel, posted a tweet praising Morocco for having agreed to the deal. Morocco became the fourth Arab state this year to normalize relations with Israel after the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan.
This is a normalization that only the leaders are taking part in and not the people. The Moroccan people are not satisfied with what the Moroccan leader did with the Israelis. Normalization leads to the destruction of the Palestinian cause, an increase in the number of settlements, and the strengthening of the word is Israel, meaning it gives it more strength to commit crimes against Palestinians.
We call the Moroccan parliament to criminalize the normalization with the Zionist occupation, enact the necessary laws to do so, and fight all its forms that only serve the interests of the enemy, no matter what the justification or the price of these deals were.
Political parties in the Central African Republic have started scaling up campaigns ahead of general elections set for the end of this month. The incumbent president, Faustin Archange Touadéra, held his first rally in the capital, Bangui, where he pledged to bring peace to a country ravaged by more than 7 years of civil war. This month's ballot will be the second since conflict broke out in 2013 when Muslim Seleka rebel alliance fought with Christian anti-Balaka militia. Armed groups still control much of the country despite a peace agreement signed almost 2 years ago.
In 4 years, we have invested in meeting the security challenge, which is the major problem in this country. And gradually, everything is getting better. The return of security to the Central African Republic concerns us all. My determination and that of the government was reflected in the signing of the peace agreement to bring peace to the Central African Republic.
Let's take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South, more news now. Anti-government protesters in Poland have gathered in Warsaw to mark the anniversary of the communist-era martial law crackdown. Protesters marched towards the home of Jarosław Kaczyński, the head of the ruling Law and Justice Party, and understood to be the country's de facto leader, even though he's only a deputy prime minister. Many Poles accuse the country's right-wing government of acting more and more like the authoritarian regime of the communist era. The march was organized by the Women's Strike, a group behind a string of mass nationwide protests since the October 22nd abortion ruling. Others also joined in, with entrepreneurs turning out in frustration at the government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic.
We are no longer fighting just for women's rights, but for everyone's rights. What is happening at this point is dramatic. I am here primarily because of women's rights, but also my dad is here, who fights for me and for others, entrepreneurs and farmers. We fight for everyone. It is no longer just a fight for women's rights. It is a fight to overthrow this government.
I'm here as a woman, as an entrepreneur, as a Polish Highlander. They locked down our businesses. We don't have any protection, so we don't know what we're going to live on after winter.
Spanish police have arrested 2 men for financing the arming of a future race war through drug trafficking. Police said the 2 men intended to form isolated white supremacist groups and were involved in financing these groups through drug trafficking. The men are suspects of promoting hate against foreigners, possession of explosives, appraisal of racist terrorism, and for being a threat to public health. The operation was part of a wider investigation which started 1 year ago. Germany will go into a partial lockdown from Wednesday, with non-essential shops and schools to close in a bid to halt an exponential growth in coronavirus pandemic.
After a period in which we could stop the exponential growth and had a sideways movement, we have had rising case numbers and exponential growth again for a few days. This means that we also have a lot of deaths. You all follow the statistics, and we know that the health system is already under great strain, and our intention has always been to avoid a strain on the health system. That is why there is an urgent need for action. Service businesses in the personal care sector, for example hairdressers, must also close. And at the schools, contacts are to be restricted, as well as the daycare centers for children. This means that children will be looked after at home whenever possible.
At least 100 workers have been arrested after staging a protest against alleged exploitative working conditions at a Taiwanese-owned iPhone factory in southern India. The workers say they have not been paid for 4 months and are being forced to work overtime hours under grueling conditions. The workers blame the Indian government for allowing the company to flout employees' basic rights. Worker strikes have become a common feature in India, where poor conditions and meager pay are widespread in workplaces. Fresh protests against India's disputed citizenship law have erupted in India's northeastern Assam state. The demonstrators have returned to the streets a year after the country saw violent protests against the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act. The law excludes Muslims from a list of ethnic minorities from Pakistan seeking Indian nationality. Widespread demonstrations hit India last year after the law was approved by the parliament. A bomb attack in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, has killed at least 2 people. According to the Kabul police chief, the sticky bomb was attached to an armored vehicle in northern Kabul, which killed 2 and wounded at least 2 others. The police said that in a separate attack, an Afghan government prosecutor was shot dead in eastern Kabul. The prosecutor was on his way to his office when he was attacked in Karti Now neighborhood. No one claimed responsibility for the attacks.
I heard an explosion, came out from my house and saw the car which was targeted. It was burning a little bit. Security guards tried to extinguish the fire, but they couldn't do it.
U.S. citizens are set to start receiving the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine from Monday, according to General Cruz Perna, head of the distribution operation.
We expect 145 sites across all the states to receive vaccine on Monday, another 425 sites on Tuesday, and the final 66 sites on Wednesday. which will complete the initial delivery of the Pfizer orders for vaccine.
And British spy thriller author John La Carre has died at the age of 89. La Carre, who was most famous for stories of conflicts, Cold War intrigue, began his career as a real-life spy in post-war Europe. He combined terse but lyrical prose with the kind of complexity expected in literary fiction. His books grappled with betrayal, moral compromise, and the psychological tool of a secret life. His best-known works were Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, and The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. His family confirmed he had died of pneumonia at the Royal Cornwall Hospital on Saturday night. The Chinese Army has commemorated the National Memorial Day for Nanjing Massacre. The Chinese Army and police held several memorial activities across the country to mourn 300,000 victims killed by the Japanese aggressors in the Nanjing on December 13, 1937, and to commemorate martyrs who sacrificed their lives for the victory of the anti-Japanese war. The 13th of December marks the 7th year of the National Memorial Day for Nanjing Massacre victims since it was first designated in 2014.
The great spirit forged in the hard struggles of the war of resistance will forever encourage us to forge ahead. As officers and soldiers on the front line, we should always remember the history and keep in mind our duties as soldiers and officers to train hard and be prepared for war. We should be able to use well the weapons and equipment in hands and improve our capability to shoulder the sacred mission of safeguarding national security and maintaining world peace.
A Chinese space capsule bringing back the first moon rocks in more than 4 decades has begun its return to the Earth. The Change 5 lunar probe, which had been orbiting the moon for about a week now, fired up 4 engines to move out of the moon's orbit and starts its 3-day return journey to the Earth. The craft's lander touched down on the moon earlier this month and collected about 2 kilograms of samples. The return capsule is expected to land in northern China in the Inner Mongolia region. The material would be the first brought back since the Soviet Union's Luna 24 probe in 1976. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also be sure to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For teleSUR English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.